All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second ACE webinar featuring University of Southern California Special Advisor to the President, Dave Roberts. Dave, welcome. My name is Paul Perry from Rutgers Athletics, and I have the honor of moderating a conversation with Dave. We're extremely lucky to have one of the most introspective minds in collegiate athletics with us today. Now, Dave labels himself a reformed attorney, and that's because prior to joining USC, he practiced law as a litigator in complex commercial cases in Southern California for more than 30 years. He was a partner at Paul Hastings in Los Angeles and later became the founding and managing partner of Roberts, Raskin Blanton. He's admitted to practice before a lot of courts in the state of California, Federal District of Columbia, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the U.S. Supreme Court. Probably in 2009 or 2010, Dave was contemplating retirement, getting ready to hit golf balls, enjoy the beaches in California when USC's president convinced him to take on the role of vice president for athletic compliance at USC, which he began in 2010 to navigate the institution through a major violation. In Dave's role, he oversaw the compliance department at USC for the next 7 years, creating what many have seen as the gold standard for athletic compliance. His leadership, legal mind, tenacity helped build a culture of integrity and compliance throughout the institution. As importantly, Dave has had a hand in promoting and improving the compliance profession on a national level through his participation on NAAC, the NCAA Enforcement Working Group, the NCAA Division I Enforcement and Infractions Review Group, and most notably, he served as a member of the Committee on Infractions for the past few years, including a recent appointment as vice chair. So congratulations on that, Dave. Really getting a good voice out there for the compliance profession. It's an incredible impact, considering he only joined collegiate athletics back in 2010. Last year, the NAAC membership, we recognized him for his achievements by awarding him with the Frank Cara Leadership Award, our industry's most prestigious recognition. Dave, too, was a student athlete. As a youngin', he played football back in his day at UC Davis with All-American. This is pre-mustache Dave Roberts, so Dave Roberts PM. He then went on to receive a law degree from the University of the Pacific. So Dave, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Look forward to hearing more about your journey. We always like to kick things off by asking you to discuss why you chose collegiate athletics, especially with where you were in your career.
Well, it's an interesting question, Paul, as you said. Athletics was always something that was near and dear to my heart. That picture aside, where I was about probably 30, 40, 50 pounds heavier than I am now. But athletics is something I always loved. During my practice of law, I always kind of monitored it. SC turned out to be a very large client, worked for an athletic department. So I always saw my career as a lawyer as kind of problem solving and pragmatic and practical approaches to resolving issues. That's basically what athletic compliance is, knowing the rules and in my opinion, having real cutting edge, proactive ideas to avoid problems and then to make problems small as opposed to large. So I've been practicing law for about 30, 35 years. I was really ready to vacate those particular offices and like Paul said, hit golf balls. But I had an opportunity and was invited by the president to head up athletic compliance at USC. They had just gone through a major infraction and really wanted to try and enhance their program. They had some great people, including Paul at the time, Ellen Ferris and others. So they asked me to kind of come on board and help do that. And I saw it as a challenge. I had gone from a big firm to a middle-sized firm, and I just really loved athletics and wanted that challenge. So starting in 2010, right after the Bush-Mayo decision came down, I came on board and worked with Paul and others, and appreciate the compliments. But what we accomplished was really a team effort. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more. But it was really, in my opinion, kind of transcending the same kind of work I'd done, knowing the rules, solving the problems in a pragmatic and practical way that led me to the final years here of my career.
So you have a pretty interesting spot being a member of the COI, something that not too many compliance administrators have had. Obviously, Jason Leonard at University of Oklahoma is joining you now as a compliance professional with the COI. What advice do you have now that you've been on that committee for a few years for new compliance administrators such as our mentees?
Well, that's, again, a good question. I'll broaden it just a little bit. I mean, I certainly got this awareness before I got to the COI, but it's probably been, reinforced since coming there. And if you're new in the compliance profession, the first thing you want to make sure you do is learn the rules, learn the interpretations, know the subject matter. And I don't mean every word, because we're not, oracles, but to know generally what those issues are so you can issue spot and be ready to move on them. The next thing I really think, not only as a compliance officer, but on the CLI, you want to be proactive. You want to be pragmatic. You want to think about how do we resolve issues, and whether that's in deliberations with your colleagues on the COI, or whether it's with coaches or athletes, how do we find out what the issue is, and how do we come up with a problem, a solution? I don't see the sanctions, the same way I think other people do on the COI. I see them as they really are solutions to problems, and we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, about how that might enable an institution to do better in the future. So again, be proactive, pragmatic, practical. Next thing I'd say is build personal relationships. Relationships I have with my colleagues, Jason Leonard, one of the people that you all know, one of my best friends, he's now on the COI, but I developed a professional relationship with him. We started this program at Regional Rules for the NC2A, where we had a summit where we educated people. And that's just kind of an example of what I'm talking about. Get to know your coaches, get to know your athletes, get to know the administrators at your institutions, and importantly, know the people who are the movers and shakers at the NC2A. Not to get favorable treatment, but to be able to have a really good discussion about how do we identify an issue, how do we resolve it in the most efficient and effective manner. Lastly, I'd say make sure you're seen as a member of the team, whichever team it is you're working with. We don't want to be outsiders. We want to be members of the team. And I know Paul was a great example of that at USC. Paul was as much a member of the basketball or whatever team that he was working with. They saw him as an ally, someone who would implement and enable them, as opposed to a roadblock. So those would be the points I would make.
So you joined USC at a time when they're, dealing with a major infraction, highly publicized in the media. It took a long time period for it to come to fruition. What did you learn from taking over a compliance department that was just dealing with that and then moving through that process?
It's interesting, and this may sound strange. I probably shouldn't say it, but I will. When a school goes through a major infraction, and in my opinion, it really enables or entitles or lays the pavement for that school to really, if they want to do it, change the culture of compliance at that institution. Invariably, there will be a period of probation. And I use that at USC, not in a heroic way, but in an effective way. I kind of had a one-yard rule. I didn't want to be at the chalk line. I never wanted to see white chalk during probation. So it actually, being under probation, actually helped us, I think, build and develop a culture of compliance. Now, obviously, it's over with now, and we've changed the culture. But I think actually, in a way, it's somewhat of a positive. I know no administrator or president will ever like that, but from a compliance point of view, it makes people stand up, take notice, become aware of things that they probably didn't focus on before. It makes people be cautious when perhaps before they weren't. It also, in my opinion, allowed you to come to your teams, whichever team it was, and to basically say, what can I do for you? How can we have a positive impact on this team while still, complying with the rules? And we'll talk more, I'm sure, later about it, but we've come up with cutting-edge programs, whether at the time it was an elite high-profile program. Obviously, Reggie Bush and O.J. Mayo were two examples, and we wanted to have programs that would help us interface and interact with high-profile athletes. When head coach responsibility came along, we developed a program of head coach responsibility so that we could educate our coaches on what would be expected of them in the future. So again, when you have a major, it allows you, I think, to get your foot in the door and really start to build a culture of compliance that perhaps didn't exist before.
So we're lucky with the ACE mentoring program. We have, the mentees who are some of the rising stars in the compliance industry, and obviously we have mentors who are very best in helping develop others. So what advice would you give, or what do you wish you would have known when you first started your career that maybe you would suggest that the mentees be tracking on as well?
Well, and I'll divide that in kind of responding in two ways. Talk a little bit about my legal career, which in a way I think is very compatible with what we do as compliance officers, and then as a compliance officer as well. As a lawyer, you see Perry Mason or whoever your favorite lawyer is, and you got to be aggressive. You got to be out there. You got to be just ripping and roaring. And I learned very quickly that sometimes it's better to take a step back and look at a document, look at an issue. Don't be so aggressive at the outset. Same thing we see in compliance. And when you're dealing with coaches, find out what it is they really want. I know they say, I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but if you really peel back the layers of the onion, it may be a little different. It may allow us to get where we want to go, even though it seems like there might be a rule in the way. So I take from my legal career, don't always be aggressive. Sometimes take a step back, look at it, reflect on things before acting. From a compliance point of view, I made this point earlier, but I'll stress it again. I started my compliance career very late. What was it? Late 50s, I guess. So I hadn't had the opportunity, as Paul has and others have had, to develop relationships with coaches and athletes and administrators, conference people, NCAA people early on in life. And that's what I would say. I wish I could have turned on it instantly. I did that very, I think, effectively. Once I started there, we would travel back to Indianapolis and get to know people. But building those personal relationships, whether it be with athletes, coaches, administrators, conference people, or NC2A staffers, of paramount importance. To be able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody that you know, as opposed to somebody you've never met before. To have that relationship, it makes the communication level just go up exponentially, and it allows you to get through issues sometimes that would be much, much harder to do if you've never talked to the person before. And I don't say that to get special treatment. I say it to establish a relationship where it's a two-way street. Both sides respect each other. Both sides know the other is very well versed and knowledgeable, but lastly, of very high integrity as well.
So just for our younger folks listening, Perry Mason is a TV lawyer from back in the day. Dave's well known to the Pac-12 for some of his references and sayings from times we might not quite know. But Perry Mason, Google, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's right. You guys probably know LA Law or Blue Bloods or something like that. You're right. It's a dinosaur term.
One thing you've been able to do at USC is really excel in hiring. You've gone through the process. You've brought in a lot of young people, developed them, and allowed them to go on and succeed. But obviously, part of that process is the development phase. So what have you seen as some of the common missteps maybe that younger professionals have made as they've gotten into the collegiate athletic industry and specifically compliance?
Yeah. I think the one that you see most is probably all of us that go into compliance. Some have legal backgrounds, some have gone other ways, but everybody likes to show their talents and show what they know. That's a good thing, but it also can be a bad thing. I think many young professionals want to get in there and they want to give an answer right away. They think if I don't give that answer right away, the coach won't respect me, or the coach will think I don't know what I'm doing. So again, it kind of goes back to that point I made, a little less aggression, a little bit more listening, what's the problem? And unless you really know exactly what that answer is as a young professional in compliance, you probably want to say, hey, let me take a quick look, let me talk to some colleagues, and I'll get right back to you. Because you want to make sure you've got the right answer, that it's timely and it's on point. The worst thing to do is to get a quick answer that's wrong, and I've seen that happen. You lose the respect of a coach. You're probably going to get someone in trouble with an infraction. So that's what I would say is probably number one, is don't respond so quickly. Get to that point where you're a little bit more developed in the rules, trust your colleagues and work that way. The other thing I'll say is, it's a favorite saying of mine, you only get one chance to make a first impression, one chance. So you really want to make sure that whether it's a coach or an athlete or administrator, you're making a good impression that first time. respect everyone. I'm not that you won't, but you really want to be doing a bang up A job every time, and be sure that if you're just too busy, if you can't do it, hey, we got to get another person to help you out. So like I said, you don't want to misfire, and we'll talk about that later in career advancement and other areas, but you want to make that good first impression. You want to have a can-do mentality. I think that's the other, like I said before, you don't want to jump too quickly, but you always want to say, hey, coach, let me see what I can figure out. We may not get 100% of the way there, but we're going to get you as close as we can. And coaches really love that. You'll come back to them and, okay, you can't quite do it the way you want, but hey, here's a way you can do it that's very creative. And Paul and others that work with me, we were able to do that at USC, and I think the coaches really respected it and liked it. We would get them most, if not all of the way. So get that can-do mentality. And the reciprocal of that is don't be seen as a roadblock or an impediment. That's the worst thing that can happen for a young compliance person is the coach doesn't want to talk to you because you always say no, or you can never get, what they want. So it's a tough road to hoe. I know that, but you want to be can-do. You don't want to be seen as an impediment. You want to be seen as a real teammate. So those are all kind of, same issues from a different perspective, but those are things that as a young compliance person you want to focus on and hopefully take those attributes and avoid the bad reciprocals.
So once someone gets on campus, a young professional, obviously most people, especially in this mentoring program, are, they're energetic, enthusiastic, they have goals they want to work towards. So what do you think, the mentees can be doing to better prepare themselves, present themselves, to be the best candidate for future opportunities, whether that's internally within compliance, whether that's moving up into an administrative role, eventually the AD chair? What are things we can be doing now to best position ourselves?
Well, let me tell you, and we hired a lot of really good people at USC, and I think a lot of them had the same attributes. So you want people that are up for a challenge. It's kind of like sink or swim mentality. Take on a new challenge. Okay, you come on board, they've got you monitoring telephone logs or doing something that's a little bit more, repetitive and probably not as glamorous as we like. Volunteer and take a chance to do something that you haven't done before. So that initiative, you will be seen as someone who's going to take the lead, someone who's going to be proactive, someone who's going to come up with a new idea. So that's one thing I think you certainly want to do. When you do that, you got to devote the time necessary to come up with a fine work product. The last thing you want to do is volunteer for something and then come up with a C product or a D product. You want to come up with an A product so that whoever your mentor, your boss is, person's got a good head on their shoulders. Another phrase, as Paul knows, the view never changes unless you're the lead dog. So you got to get out there and you got to try some new things. And that's why I think that the people who are most successful in our profession, they expand their area of comfort. They're learning more about different things, whether it's the eligibility center, whether it's something about the drug programs, whether it's something about Title IX and how that might impact. Stretch your comfort level and show that you can do really good work, and you're gonna move along. Like I said before, we talked about developing those personal relationships, another very key attribute of progressing as a young professional.
So skipping forward a bit, Dave, and just bringing up something you touched on earlier, you talked about the importance of developing relationships, whether it's in your conference office, at the national office. I think one thing you did really well when you got to USC was, you had a lot to learn quickly, and you were able to branch out, bring resources in to help. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of developing those contacts?
Absolutely. And by the way, I don't think it's something unique to athletic compliance. It's unique to the service industry, which law is, and that's where I first learned it. Whether it's, back then it was developing relationships with clients and getting business, knowing the judge and the proclivities of the judges, knowing your adversaries and being able to try a case without, having, literally a war with the opposing counsel. So, but they're equally applicable to compliance. And the reason you want to develop those relationships, both on your own staff for example, we had a staff of 10, 12 people, whether it's with the administrators, the coaches, or the NC2A people. It provides a basis for a number of issues, and let me go through them. Knowledge. First of all, you're going to learn from these relationships. You're going to learn substantively, procedurally. That's going to be a big help. Problem solving. Those relationships are going to help you identify and solve problems in a unique way that's going to position you to be perceived as someone who's a cut above, which is what you want. Networking is kind of the same thing. The more we have these relationships, and they'll blossom out, you'll get to know one person at the NC2A headquarters, and then 2 and 3. Every time I would go back, I would get introduced to a new person. Paul interned at the NC2A, and a couple times he would set up appointments for me so I could meet X or Y or Z who I wouldn't ordinarily meet in the course of potentially an enforcement-related issue. So again, networking is going to help there. Obviously, references and referrals. So when you develop these personal relationships, you're going to start to get to be known, and you're going to be referred or referenced to people, whether that's for a job opportunity or to solve a problem. I can't count the number of times when someone had referred me or Paul or someone else on our staff, hey, talk to those guys at SC. They just developed a program for elite high-profile monitoring or head coach responsibility. So you'll build your reputation through this. All of those things, you draw a line and underneath our career advancement. All those things help you advance your career, and they all, are really things that come out of great personal relationships with high-quality people. And I say that not to get, that we're going to get some favorable treatment, that someone's going to put their hand on the scale, whether it be an enforcement or with the conference or anyone else. It really goes back to this point of if you develop mutual respect, whoever we're talking about knows that you know your stuff, they know their stuff, and you're both ethical and respect one another, you'll be able to solve problems much more quickly. And when they're looking to hire somebody to move up the ranks, your name's going to come at the top of the list.
It's obviously been a very busy and eventful year so far in collegiate athletics. What is one topic that you'd recommend that we keep an eye on closely in the coming year?
I'll give you 2. The one that I think is clearly, if you read the Rice Commission report, they had some interesting things to say about name, image, and likeness. I think that's going to happen faster than most people do. There are a number of big cases up in the Northern District of California before Judge Wilkin, but I think either as a result of membership activity or legal activities, we're going to see some big changes in name, image, and likeness. So if I were in compliance, I'd be watching, looking there, and I would be ready to turn and pivot to come up with programs that allow you to take advantage of those changes with your athletes and staff, because it's going to happen. In the decision that was taken up on appeal, the O'Bannon case, there was a name and likeness issue there. It turned out the Ninth Circuit overturned it, but SC, we had developed a whole plan on how we were going to address what the court had said in terms of setting aside monies in trust that had related to that issue. So that's issue number 1. More broadly, I would be watching the Rice Commission and see how those recommendations get implemented, whether it's on the enforcement side, whether it's on the eligibility side, the transfer issue. Just read that report. You're going to see 6 or 7 things that pop out as issues that I think are going to come to fruition: transfers, name, image, likeness, and probably some new ways we operate in the enforcement, investigation, and processing of major infractions.
What's the one thing, looking back on what you've done in athletic compliance, what's the one thing you enjoyed the most that you look forward to in working in compliance?
Well, I'll give you 2. Just one?
Okay, fine, 2.
Well, it's twofold. One, I love the fact that we were able to come up with what I thought were cutting-edge, new, innovative programs. That's the way you get change. We actually came up with some ideas at USC about name, image, and likeness. Now, they didn't get implemented because that decision got overturned. But, facilitating positive results, coming up with programs that allow our coaches to do things that perhaps they haven't thought about in other institutions, and I got great satisfaction out of that. So that would be the first one. The second one would be to watch colleagues progress. And I think probably some people say, hey, I never want my staff to change, because once you get a good staff, you don't want them to leave. I take a different view. I always thought and took great comfort in the fact that people who worked with me, my colleagues, developed national reputations and were able to go out and head up offices, at other major institutions. So I would say those two things, making my clientele happy, but also watching my colleagues move out and make a name for themselves, equally fulfilling.
Sounds like the comments from a true mentor.
I hope so.
So if you had a crystal ball, looking forward to the next academic year, next 2 years, what are a couple things that you think are going to be hot button issues for compliance professionals to be monitoring, tracking on, maybe trends you see coming through the COI?
Well, academics is clearly a big one. As a result of some of the major cases lately, and as you know, there was a big renovation of the rules, bylaws involved in academics. So I think that academic piece will continue to be a major issue. So that's something that I would make sure you've got people, who are really knowledgeable about how the rules will impact and what kind of prophylactic and preventative systems could be put in place to make sure you don't have that kind of a problem. So I think that's really big. The other issue that's going to change too, you saw the Rice Commission note it, is this issue with agents. There's going to be some kind of a change of how we deal with agents. Hockey and baseball have dealt with it differently, but those are the only two sports that really have, and I see something much more akin to what's happening there coming about in all of the other sports. Easier said than done. Now, still going to have to do some tracking and make sure that tangible benefits aren't passed prematurely and things like that, but agents is the second area I would look in. Lastly, it's come back to that name, image, and likeness. Whether we call it pay for play or whatever it is, something's gonna happen there. I don't know if it's this year or next year, but it is going to happen. And those three areas I think are three hot buttons to look at.
So, we've asked a lot of questions geared towards the mentees and developing professionally. Do you have any thoughts? I mean, you've been a very successful mentor. I mean, obviously, I can speak from experience. Do you have any comments for the mentors on how they can do a better job, or maybe things to think about while they're helping these young professionals through their career?
And a good question. One thing that's come to mind is there's no single style. I mean, you're going to get people who work for you if you're the mentor. What works for X doesn't work for Y. What motivates Z doesn't work for H. So in my opinion, if you're going to be a truly great mentor, manager, leader, you've got to be able to shift gears and use different styles to manage different colleagues, whether there be people on your staff or coaches or athletes, because you're going to find that they don't all respond the same way to constructive criticism. They don't all march to the same drummer. So that's one thing I say. The true excellence in mentorship really has that ability to kind of figure out, okay, how do I motivate X? And how do I motivate Y? Because it may well be different. The other thing I would say too is good faith evaluations. I think one of the things that I've seen happen over the last 20, 30 years with the rise in litigation in labor-related areas, nobody wants to be critical. So we have all these evaluation programs with numbers and letters and all this kind of stuff, but not invariably, but with a lot of individuals, I think they don't, or they shy away from giving real, meaningful, frank, constructive criticism. I don't mean to tear someone down, but I mean, you've got to, in order to grow, you've got to know where to grow. And to know where to grow, you've got to point out some either deficiencies or areas that people need improvement. And you should do that in a way that's really it can be understood in a comprehensive way. I would do it in a sit-down kind of a narrative fashion. I wouldn't say you're a 1, a 2, or 3, or 4. I'd say, hey, here's what you really need to work on, this skill, or that skill, or this skill. because I think unfortunately, because of the way our litigation system works and others, people are always prone to kind of say, well, I can't comment on that, or you're just going to put them in the middle so there's no friction, or you're going to everybody gets kind of inflated, so everybody's good, which we know can't quite be the truth all the time. So good faith, honest evaluation, constructive criticism, I think, is something that really allows a mentor to advance his staff or her staff or the colleagues and clients they work for.
Dave, last question. Obviously you've had a really successful career. What's something in particular you're proud to have played a role in bringing about or to have accomplished?
Well, you mentioned, I think, several of them in your kind introduction, and I'd point to three of them. One, I do take great pride in, I think, kind of the enhancement of the USC athletic compliance reputation. I think, I won't say we're the best in the country, but I think we did a great job. I think we were creative, and I think we gave a lot of good mentoring to other institutions. So that would be one. The second one was, working through NAAC and through others to increase the profile and stature of senior compliance professionals. I think for all too long, compliance professionals have kind of been looked at as, they know the rules, the nuts and bolts people, but we really have our hand on every aspect of intercollegiate athletics, whether it's fundraising or on the field activities or recruiting, eligibility. And some really bright people need to be in the leadership role. So I take pride in the fact that, I and others working with me have tried to, enhance and increase the profile of our senior people across the country. The last one is, and I've said it before, I take great pride in the fact that people who work with me, my colleagues, are now leading programs at other major institutions. I think that's, to me, a very flattering situation. Obviously, the mentorship must have done something right, because we got a lot of good, talented people that have come from SC that are now heading up programs across the country.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just reiterate what you said. I think what you've done with the NAAC Professional Development Committee, chaired by Jason Leonard, and obviously the ACE Mentoring Group, which is spearheaded by Dave Reed and Mitzi Clayton. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities that are trying to be created for young professionals. So thank you for your work on that. Dave, always a pleasure. Thank you for both taking the time to join us and share your experiences, thoughts, and ideas. We look forward to the coming Q&A sessions, which we'll do after the mentees and mentors have had a chance to watch the webinar. And of course, hopefully people can connect with you at the NAAC convention, which you may be going to. I'm sure you'll have your table set up for autographs and pictures with your Frank Cara Award, and maybe you can get some autographed pictures of the Flying Californian at some point too. But Dave, thank you so much for your time. Truly, truly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, and appreciate all the great softball questions you gave me.
All right, we'll talk soon. Bye now.
Bye-bye.